I've lived in this house for 6 months now. It's nothing fancy, just a quiet, slightly older place on the edge of a sleepy neighborhood. At first, I loved the peace, the silence, the sense of being away from everything. But that peace cracked last Thursday morning. When I opened the front door to grab the paper, I stopped cold. There, carved into the wood just below the peephole, were jagged letters. 5 of them, uneven, deep, like someone had dragged a blade across the surface with violent intent. Return, I stood there, staring at it, still half asleep. At first, I thought maybe it was vandalism, some bored kid in the neighborhood pulling a dumb prank. But something about the word felt purposeful, not random, not casual, like a command. And the way it was carved, angry, frantic, it unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. I didn't tell anyone. I just sanded it down the best I could and painted over the spot. I even joked to myself that it was probably some punk who thought my house belonged to someone else. Wrong address, wrong guy. That night, I triple checked that every door and window was locked. Still, I slept poorly. The next morning, it was there again. Return. Same spot. Same word. But this time, it was deeper. The grooves cut into the wood like claws instead of a knife. More forceful. More desperate. The paint I had applied the day before had been peeled away like skin. This wasn't a prank anymore. I stared at the door for a long time. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to get close. The air around. It felt wrong. It's hard to describe. Cold, yes, but not like a draft. It was dense, heavy, like stepping into a freezer. And when I leaned in just close enough to examine the marks, I thought I heard something. A whisper, faint. So faint, I thought I imagined it at first. It came from behind the door, right behind it. Like someone was standing on the porch, whispering directly through the wood. I froze. My hand hovered above the doorknob. I held my breath and leaned closer. The whisper was steady, soft, and rhythmic. Not like someone muttering, like a chant. Return, return, return. My heart nearly stopped. I flung the door open, half expecting someone to be standing there, face to face with me. But there was nothing, just empty air, the streetlights, still humming as dawn broke, and a breeze that didn't feel quite natural. I stepped outside, scanned the porch. Nothing. No footprints. No tools. No scratches anywhere else. Just that single word burned into the door behind me, like a scar. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the couch facing the entry, the hallway light left on. I told myself I'd catch whoever was doing it. If it was a person, I'd confront them. If it wasn't, well, I wasn't ready to finish that sentence. Around 2:45 a.m., it started again. At first it was faint, so soft, I thought maybe it was the wind. But no, it was the same rhythmic dragging sound I'd heard the night before. Slow, deliberate scratches. Like something was clawing at the door from the other side. I crept closer, moving inch by inch until I was only a foot away. I pressed my ear to the wood, and that's when I heard it again. The whisper. Return. Return. This time, it was louder. Urgent. Like the voice was inside the door, not outside. I stood there, paralyzed, breath caught in my throat. Then, without thinking, I yanked the door open. Nothing. Just stillness and the echo of my heartbeat in my ears. But when I looked down at the wood, my stomach dropped. The word was there again. Return. Even deeper, even angrier. Fresh splinters. Littered the welcome mat. And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't just about the door. Whatever this was, it was trying to get in. After that second night, everything changed. It wasn't just the door anymore. The house itself felt different, like it had absorbed the dread from those scratches. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. I couldn't move through my own home without feeling like I was being watched. But the worst part was the sound. That third night, as I paced my hallway around midnight, I realized something terrifying. The whispering wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside. I'd be walking past the kitchen or the stairs and hear it just beneath the surface of everything else, barely audible. Like the whisper was hiding in the walls. Return. I tried blasting music to drown it out. I left every light on in the house. Nothing helped. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd jolt awake to the sound of something brushing against the walls, or dragging itself across the floor just outside my bedroom door. By the time morning came, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. That's why I finally called my friend Matt. He was the kind of guy who didn't scare easy, grew up in a rough part of town, worked construction for years, and always had some rational explanation for things. I figured if anyone could snap me out of this paranoia, it was him. He showed up that afternoon with a six-pack and a skeptical grin. So, what's going on, man? You sound like you haven't slept in a week, he said, stepping into my living room and immediately wrinkling. His nose. It's freezing in here. I hadn't even noticed. I was so used to the cold by now, it felt normal. I walked him to the front door and pointed. There it was again. Return etched into the wood just beneath where I'd sanded it off the night before. The new letters were deeper, angrier. The grooves almost looked burned in. Matt stopped grinning. Okay. Creepy. You think someone's messing with you? Listen, I said, and we both stood still. For a long moment there was nothing. Just the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Then it came. A whisper. Soft. From behind the door. Return. Matt turned slowly, staring at me with wide eyes. You heard that, right? I asked. He nodded once, his face pale. That came from inside the house? We both just stood there for a while, not speaking. Then he cleared his throat. All right, you're not crazy. This is weird. We decided to stay up that night. Together. We moved the couch to face the front door and left just the hallway light on, same as I had before. Armed with a flashlight and the bat I kept by my bed, we sat in silence, waiting. The clock crept toward 3 a.m., and every passing second felt like it weighed more than the last. I could see Matt glancing at me occasionally. His usual tough guy mask was cracking. He wasn't used to this kind of silence. The oppressive kind. And then it started. Scratch. Scratch. Both our heads snapped toward the door. The sound was unmistakable, slow, deliberate clawing. Nails on wood. Matt mouthed, You hear that? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We crept toward the door together, slow and quiet. The whispering returned. It grew louder with every step. More urgent, desperate. Return. Return. I swear, the closer we got, the thicker the air became, like we were wading through something invisible. My ears felt full, like I was underwater. My chest ached from holding my breath. Matt reached for the doorknob, hand trembling. And just as his fingers touched the metal, everything stopped. The scratching, the whispering, gone, like someone hit pause on the world. We looked at each other, unsure what to do. Then, with a burst of bravery, Matt yanked the door open. Nothing, just empty air, the same quiet porch, the same glow of the streetlight. No person, no shadow, no footprints. But when we turned back toward the house, we saw it. The word return was carved into the door again, so deep this time that shards of wood had splintered off and scattered across the floor. Matt's voice was barely a whisper. Dude, this isn't a person. That's when he suggested we set up a camera or something to catch whatever this was in the act. Maybe then we'd understand. Maybe then we'd have proof. I agreed without hesitation, because one thing had become painfully clear to both of us. Whatever was doing this wasn't human. Matt brought over his old security camera the next evening. Nothing fancy. Just a motion-activated model with night vision. We mounted it just above the front door, aimed downward to catch the full porch. If something or someone was leaving those marks, we'd have them on tape. I didn't even bother pretending to sleep that night. Neither did Matt. We brewed a fresh pot of coffee, dragged our chairs to the living room and settled in for another long, silent wait. The door stood in plain view, bathed in that sickly yellow hallway light. Every time the shadows shifted or a tree branch scraped against the window outside, I felt my spine stiffen. Matt tried to make small talk at first, jokes, distractions, anything to keep things light, but I wasn't in the mood. I couldn't stop staring at the door. Something about it felt different tonight, like it was waiting too. Around 2:45 a.m., Matt finally stopped talking. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I did. At first, it was faint, a soft, rhythmic scraping like nails on a wooden desk. But then it grew louder, clearer, the exact same sound I'd heard nights before. Scratch, scratch. Matt's face drained of color. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the door. The air changed again, just like before, dense, oppressive, like we were breathing underwater. My skin broke out in goosebumps, and I felt a pressure in my ears, like something was building behind the silence. And then came the whisper, "Return." That single word, repeated like a mantra. It seemed to slither through the house, coming from the walls, the floorboards, even the ceiling. It was everywhere. Matt reached for the bat beside him, his hand shaking. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how. I just stood up and crept toward the door. Matt, right behind me. Every step made the whisper louder. "Return, return." I pressed my ear to the wood, heart hammering. The voice was there, just behind it, low and desperate. Matt leaned in beside me, listening too. We both stood frozen, listening to something we couldn't explain, and then it stopped. All at once, scratching, whispering, cold, gone, like a switch had flipped. We looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Matt motioned. "Should we open it?" I nodded, though I wasn't. Sure. Some part of me needed to see it, to confirm it was real. He turned the knob and flung the door open. Nothing. Again. Same porch, same quiet street. No person, no movement, not even wind this time. Just stillness so complete it felt staged. My breath fogged up in front of me, and that's when I noticed something strange. The porch temperature wasn't just cold, it was freezing. Like the warmth of the house couldn't pass beyond the doorway. We stepped outside for a moment, scanning the porch, the bushes, the sidewalk. Nothing, no footsteps, no camera distortion. Just a creeping dread settling deeper into my bones. Then we turned back around. That's when we saw it. Carved into the door again, even deeper this time. "Return," in gouged, angry letters. The wood looked like it had been torn apart by claws, not scratched. Tiny shards of it lay scattered across the floor, and the letters had splintered the surface. So badly I could see straight into the inner grain. Matt knelt beside it, running a finger along the grooves. This happened while we were watching, while we were right here. I didn't hear a thing. He looked up at me, eyes wide with something I had never seen in him before. That's not possible, man. And yet it had happened. Neither of us knew what to say after that. We sat back down, this time in silence, waiting for the sun to come up. Every creak in the house made us flinch. Every breath felt like it echoed too loudly. By the time morning broke, we both looked wrecked. I was on the verge of falling asleep when Matt finally said it. "We need to check the footage." Now. So we did. We pulled the memory card from the camera and loaded it up on my laptop. What we found on that recording would change everything, and it would confirm one thing once and for all. This wasn't just in my head. We barely spoke as I loaded the video file on my laptop. Matt hovered behind me, arms crossed, breathing shallow. I clicked play, and we both leaned in, eyes fixed to the screen, like our lives depended on it. The footage started at midnight. The porch was still washed in a pale cone of light from the overhead bulb. The video had no sound, but we could see every fluttering leaf, every shadow dancing along the edges. For the first 2 hours, nothing, just silence and stillness. It almost made me feel stupid, like we'd imagined everything. But then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., The footage glitched. The image warped for a second, twisting sideways, like someone had grabbed the frame and tugged it out of shape. Static rippled across the screen, followed by a brief blackout. Then it returned to normal, almost. Except now, something was there. A figure stood on my porch, not walking up, not coming into frame, just there like it had blinked into existence. It wasn't a man. Not really. It had the shape of a human tall with arms and legs, but the edges of it were wrong. Like its body flickered between dimensions. Its limbs twitched unnaturally, like a puppet yanked by tangled strings. The longer I stared, the more my brain struggled to process it. It looked blurry, like it didn't belong in the image at all. I felt Matt's hand grip my shoulder. The figure stepped toward the door. Its arms moved with sudden, jerking bursts. Long, bony fingers extended from sleeves that didn't quite match the shape of arms. It placed one hand on the door and began to scratch. We watched, completely frozen, as it carved each letter into the wood. R-A-T-U, Anne. Fingers moved fast and frantic, like it was trying to beat a countdown we couldn't see. And yet, somehow, the scratches were precise, the same letters, the same depth and fury as the ones we'd seen in person. But there was no sound. No audio. Glitch. No scraping. No noise at all. The camera caught the motion, but the act of carving didn't register as sound. As if the scratches were happening in a different reality altogether, I leaned in closer to the screen. Where's its face? Matt didn't answer, and I didn't blame him. Because the thing had no face. There was just a black void where its head should have been, not shadow absence. Like someone had cut a hole in the world and that hole was wearing a body. As soon as it finished the last stroke of the final letter, it froze. Completely still. Then it turned toward the camera. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The thing didn't move like a person. Its head snapped toward us in a violent, unnatural motion. No eyes, no mouth, just that black, empty space staring directly into the lens. Matt muttered behind me. It sees us. The screen flickered again. For a brief moment, everything turned black. Then the camera came back online normal. Empty porch, no figure, no movement. Just the door freshly carved, still catching the light. Matt backed away, visibly shaken. That's not human. That's not anything I've ever seen. I didn't reply. My mouth was dry. My hands were trembling. But I couldn't stop staring at that last image, the figure looking into the camera like it knew we were watching. That thing wanted us to see. Later that day, after Matt left to get his head straight, I started digging. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I needed to know what the hell this was. After hours of searching public records, I found something. A local news article, nearly 20 years old. A missing persons report. The man's name was Thomas Whitaker. He lived at my address. My house. Vanished without a trace. And the final line of the report chilled me more than anything I'd seen in that footage. The only clue left behind was a word carved into the front door. Return. I didn't leave the house the next day. Not even to grab food. That video had gutted whatever belief I still had in rational explanations. And the article about Thomas Whitaker, that sealed it. He'd lived here. He'd gotten the same message carved into his door. He'd disappeared without a trace. And now I was next. Matt texted me around noon, telling me to crash at his place for a few days. Said I needed rest. Said he didn't like how I sounded, but I didn't go, because something in me had changed. I didn't want to run anymore. If I left, I knew it. Wouldn't matter. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't tied to the porch anymore. It had seen me. It had whispered to me. It had followed me into my dreams the night before, and I could feel it getting closer. Like the word return wasn't just a command, it was a claim. That night, I turned off every light in the house. The only illumination came from the streetlights, leading through the front windows. I sat in the living room alone, holding the baseball bat with both hands, my arms tense and slick with sweat. Time passed like syrup. When the clock hit 3 a.m., the temperature in the house plummeted. I could see my breath, thick and white, puffing out in the cold, and then I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. But this time it wasn't coming from the other side of the door. It was coming from the inside. I stood slowly, the bat shaking in my hands. The sound wasn't distant or muffled anymore. It was right there, in front of me. I approached the door, heart hammering, throat tight, and then, right before my eyes, I watched it happen. The wood began to splinter on its own. Lines carved themselves into the door with invisible force, like a blade pressed into it by a hand I couldn't see. One stroke at a time, RATU, and the gouges appeared in perfect order. No tool, no body, no figure. Just the word burning itself into the door in real time. Then the whispering started again, but not from outside. Not even from behind the door. It was everywhere. It came from the walls, the floor, the air. Return, return, return. I backed away, and that's when I saw it. The shadow. It emerged from the far corner of the room, not walking, not even moving, but forming, like fog condensing into a shape. It stretched upward, limbs too long, joints bending in the wrong places. It looked exactly like the figure from the footage, twitchy, impossible, wrong. Its head snapped toward me. I froze. Its eyes, if you could call them that, were like dim embers buried deep in a void. Faint red glows floating in a face that didn't exist. It stepped forward, its feet not quite touching the ground. Each movement came with a twitch, like someone pulling at the wrong wire of a broken marionette. I wanted to run. I tried, but my legs wouldn't move. The whispers became a roar in my skull. Return, return. My ears rang. My vision blurred. The walls pulsed like lungs. And the door, my front door, began to shake violently. Behind me, as if something else, something worse, was trying to break through. In a blind panic, I dropped the bat and scrambled for the kitchen drawer. My hand closed around a cheap plastic lighter. I flicked it on and held it up. Stay back. I screamed, my voice breaking. The moment the flame appeared, the figure reeled back like it had been struck. Its form convulsed, the red glows in its face flashing wildly. The shadows that made up its body whipped and curled around it, retreating from the tiny flame like it was a bonfire. The door stopped shaking. The whispers halted mid-word. The shadow let out a sound, not a growl, not a scream, but a ripping noise like fabric tearing in reverse. Then it twisted violently and imploded into itself, vanishing. In a swirl of blackness. Silence. Just like that, it was gone. I stood in the dark, panting, gripping the lighter like it was a weapon forged by gods. The scratches on the door stopped deepening. The whispering faded into a memory. And for the first time in what felt like days, I let myself breathe. But even then, somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows like nothing had ever happened. The house felt still, not peaceful, just paused, like whatever had taken place in. The night was waiting to begin again, but hadn't chosen when. I walked to the front door with my heart in my throat. The word was gone. Return, which had been carved so deep it splintered the wood, was no longer visible. The surface looked freshly sanded, the grain clean and smooth like it had never been. Touched. No gouges, no chips, not even a scuff. It should have been a relief, but that made it worse. I didn't erase it. Something else did. The air still felt cold, like a breath on the back of my neck that wouldn't stop. But I tried to convince myself that it was over. Maybe whatever I'd faced had been driven out. Maybe the lighter had worked. Maybe the thing couldn't stand fire. Maybe I spent the rest of the day trying to keep busy, cleaned, cooked, answered texts from Matt, who wanted to come by that night. I told him I needed a day to myself. He didn't press. By sunset, I was starting to believe I'd won. That hope lasted exactly 2 hours. After a long, hot shower, I stepped out into the steam-filled bathroom and wiped the mirror. My blood ran cold. There, etched into the glass not drawn, but scratched in, were the same jagged letters. return, each one was gouged with the same ferocity as before, slashing through the reflective surface in wild, desperate strokes. The word vibrated in the foggy mirror like it was still alive. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet tile. My heart was pounding again, that familiar panic rising like bile in my throat. It was back, or maybe it never left. I rushed into my bedroom, unsure of what I was even looking for. Another shadow, another message, anything. The room was empty, but then I saw it. A piece of folded paper slipped under the door, just sitting there, innocuous and small, like a note left by a friend. My hand shook as I picked it up. The handwriting was messy, jagged, each letter scrawled like it had been carved instead of written. It said, "You belong here." That's all. No name. No threat. Just a statement. A claim. I dropped it like it burned me. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The word return wasn't meant as a warning. It wasn't telling me to go away. It was telling me to come back. I wasn't being haunted by something trying to break in. I was being called. Drawn back to something I didn't remember. Or didn't want to. Maybe Whitaker hadn't been the first. Maybe I wasn't the second. Maybe this house doesn't just attract people. Maybe it reclaims them. That's when the real fear hit me, something deeper than the nights of whispering. Deeper than the scratches on the door. The fear that maybe I never really moved. And maybe I always belonged here. And now the house was just taking me back. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I wake up in strange places, in the hallway, standing at the front door, hand on the knob. I've started locking myself in the bedroom at night, but some mornings I wake up to find the locks undone. Last week I found return carved into the ceiling above my bed. And last night, the mirror didn't show my reflection, just the porch, empty, still, waiting. If you're reading this, if someone finds this message, I want you to know one thing. Don't come looking for me, because I think I'm already gone, and the door is still open. The first time it happened, I thought I was dreaming. I shot up in bed, heart hammering, the sound still echoing in my ears. A thunderous crash, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my kitchen. For a second, I just sat there, disoriented, sweat clinging to my back. The digital clock on my nightstand blinked, red through the dark. 1:11 a.m., groggy and confused. I stumbled down the hallway, the silence pressing it around me like a thick fog. The closer I got to the kitchen, the more the air felt wrong, tense, like walking into a room where someone had just screamed and left. When I flicked the light on, I froze. Every cabin door was wide open, not just ajar, flung open, all of them. The top row, the bottom row, even the tiny spice cupboard above the fridge. They hung there like gaping mouths, utterly still, as if frozen mid-scream. The dishes inside didn't appear disturbed, but I could feel something had been. I just stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, staring at the open cabinets with my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't explain it. There was no wind, no quake. Nothing had fallen. And yet, the windows had rattled like a bomb had gone off. I checked every door and window in the house, all locked. No signs of forced entry. After 10 minutes of standing. In that unnatural quiet, I did the only thing I could. I closed the cabinets, one by one, telling myself it was just weird old house stuff. Old pipes, bad hinges, maybe the heat, whatever. I went back to bed, trying to ignore the feeling that something had been watching me from the dark corners of the kitchen. The next day, I told myself I'd imagined it. That maybe I'd been half asleep. Maybe I never even got out of bed. But I still felt uneasy. Like the house was holding its breath, waiting. I made a point to check the cabinets that night. I shut every single one carefully, pressing them closed until I heard that satisfying click. I even stacked a few items against them, just in case. Then I waited. I stayed up watching TV, dozing in and out on the couch. But as the clock crawled toward 1 a.m., that same tension returned, a heaviness, like something old and hungry had awakened in the walls. The silence in the house deepened, thickened. No cars outside. No wind. Just the ticking of the clock and the thud of my own heartbeat. 1:09 a.m., 1:10 a.m. I sat upright, breath shallow, eyes on the kitchen doorway. 1:11, bang. Every single cabinet exploded open again. The sound was so loud it rattled the blinds. The couch jerked beneath me as if the house itself had jolted in surprise. I leapt to my feet, rushing into the kitchen with my adrenaline spiking. Same scene, every door wide open, hanging motionless. The dishes clinking softly like they'd just been disturbed. But this time, I noticed something new. The floor near the sink, it was wet. A thin trail of moisture that glistened in the kitchen light, leading out from beneath the sink like something had crawled out. I knelt down to touch it. Cold, not just damp, frigid. Like ice water. My hands trembled as I stood up and backed away. No burst pipes, no leak, just that same perfect trail. I wanted to tell myself I wasn't dealing with something unnatural, but there was no denying it now. Someone was opening those cabinets. And it wasn't finished with me. I shut the doors slowly, afraid of what might happen if I slammed them. My fingers tingled as they brushed the freezing wood. Then I turned out the lights and stood there in the dark kitchen, listening. And in that silence, I swear I heard it, a faint whisper, just under my breath, so quiet I could barely hear the word, open. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. The moment I turned off the lights and got back into bed, the silence became unbearable. It wasn't peaceful or restful, it was dense, alive, like the house itself was waiting for me to fall asleep again. I kept hearing things tiny, clicks, a slow creak, what might have been breathing from the other side of the kitchen wall. I sat there under the covers until the sun came up, holding my phone in a death grip. I must have dozed off sometime after 6 a.m. because the next thing I remember is waking up to my phone buzzing in my hand. Jess was calling. Alex? Her voice came through, groggy and confused. You sound like you haven't slept in days. I didn't even hesitate. I told her everything. The 1:11 a.m. bangs, the open cabinets, the freezing cold wood, the wet trail from the sink, even the whisper I wasn't sure I had really heard. I expected her to laugh or maybe gently suggest I take a break from work. But Jess had always been different. She didn't laugh. I'm coming over, she said without hesitation. We'll figure this out together. By the time she arrived that evening, the house was back to its usual state. Clean, quiet, nothing visibly wrong. The cabinets were shut tight again, and I was starting to feel like maybe I'd finally snapped. Jess stepped into the kitchen, her eyes scanning every corner. It looks normal, she muttered, almost disappointed. But I'll believe it when I see it. I didn't realize how badly I needed her to see it until she was standing there next to me. I wasn't crazy. I couldn't be. We spent the evening trying to talk about anything else. We ate takeout in the living room, half watching TV, making nervous small talk. But as midnight crept closer, we stopped pretending. Jess turned off the TV and stared at the clock on the wall. 12:58 a.m. The tension between us grew thick, like the air had turned syrupy. Jess moved to sit beside me on the couch, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to brace herself, trying to believe it could be explained. 1:08 a.m. The air changed. It dropped in temperature like someone had opened a freezer door and stepped inside. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Jess leaned forward, instinctively holding her breath. 1:10. I felt the shift like the moment right before a lightning strike. Static in the air, pressure building in my ears. Then 1:11. Bang. The entire kitchen erupted. The crash of the cabinets slamming open was louder than I'd ever heard. The floor shook beneath us. Jess shrieked and grabbed my arm, her nails digging in deep. We bolted into the kitchen and stood frozen in the doorway. Every cabinet door was flung open. Again, the same way, the same angle. Perfectly unhinged. The cold was unbearable this time, like walking into a morgue. The dishes clinked softly, swaying. That same thin line of moisture stretched out from the sink, like something had slithered out and vanished. Jess's face was pale, her voice barely audible. You weren't lying. No, I said, my breath fogging in front of me. I wish I was. We both stood there for a long moment before she slowly stepped forward. She reached out and touched the nearest cabinet door. She yanked her hand back immediately. It's like ice. We didn't need more convincing. Jess turned to me, her voice low and serious. We need to catch this on camera. Whatever this is, we need proof. I nodded. Maybe we'll see what's doing it. We spent the next hour setting up two small cameras, one over the sink, one aimed at the full line of cabinets. I checked the battery life twice. We positioned everything perfectly. That night, we didn't try to sleep. We just sat in silence on the couch, eyes locked on the kitchen, waiting, listening, counting the minutes. We didn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a scream waiting to happen. The clock glowed quietly on the wall, ticking toward that cursed hour. Jess sat beside me, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the kitchen like she expected it to leap at us. When the time hit 1:11 a.m., the kitchen exploded again. BOOM. The cabinets slammed open in unison, louder than ever before. The sound cracked through the house like thunder. I flinched. Jess screamed. This time, I swear I saw the light fixture above the sink swing, like the force of the slam had knocked it loose. I ran into the kitchen and turned the lights on. Same scene. Every door wide open. Same icy chill. Same silence afterward, like the house had just taken a breath and was holding it. We didn't speak. We just shut the cabinets in a kind of trance. Our hands shaking, and then we bolted to the laptop to check the camera footage. I pulled the memory card and slid it into the reader. My fingers trembled as I opened the video files. The footage started normally. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the glow of a nightlight near the stove. For the first hour or so, it was boring, nothing moved, nothing stirred. Just the still image of our perfectly ordinary kitchen. Then the timestamp flipped to 1 hour 11 minutes and 0 seconds, and all hell broke loose. The screen shook violently. For 3 full seconds, the image glitched, warping like the lens had been dipped in water. Then it cleared, and the cabinets flew open in real time on screen, but it wasn't just the doors. There were hands, black, skeletal, gnarled hands, flickering like static, emerging from the cabinets and yanking them open. Dozens of them, some pulled from the shadows beneath the sink. Others slithered out from between the plates and glasses. Like cockroaches, Jess gasped behind me, hand over her mouth. They're opening them. From the inside. I couldn't speak. I was frozen, staring at the video, trying to understand how something could crawl out of places no bigger than a dinner plate. And then one of them looked up. The camera over the sink caught it clearly. A dark figure, almost featureless, standing in the dead center of the kitchen. No eyes, no face, just a swirling void where its head should have been. It turned slowly toward the lens as if it knew it was being watched. The video glitched again as its face tilted. Just for a frame or two, I swear I saw something inside the rows of them. But not human. The figure held its gaze for what felt like forever, then blinked out of sight. Silence. Jess leaned closer to the screen and pointed. Wait, look there. I squinted. At the bottom of the screen, just beyond the reach of the open cabinet doors, the wet trail had appeared again. But this time, it wasn't just a puddle. There was a faint mark, a shape, some kind of symbol in the water, half faded but still visible. It looked like a circle surrounded by jagged triangles, a line through the center like a knife or a blade. A sigil. My throat went dry. I've seen that before, I whispered. Jess turned to me, where I stood up, my mind racing. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to remember. There was a story online, years ago, about this house. A guy who lived here before me, he died right here, in the kitchen. What happened to him? They found him surrounded by symbols. Said he had a seizure or a heart attack, but his cabinets were torn apart. Just like this. Jess looked horrified. He tried to get rid of something, didn't he? I nodded, and failed. The kitchen was quiet again. Too quiet. Jess's voice barely carried. Then we need to figure out what he was trying to banish and how to finish it. I closed the laptop and stared back at the kitchen. 111 was coming again. And next time, I wasn't sure the thing in the cabinets would stop at just slamming doors. We spent the next day combing through everything we could find: old forums, online archives, anything tied to this house. The further we dug, the darker it got. Turns out the guy I mentioned, Alan Merritt, the previous tenant, hadn't just died in the kitchen. He'd warned people first, left notes, scribbled pages found all over the house when the landlord came to clean it out. Most were thrown out. But one quote from the police report stuck with me. They come through the doors. The doors you open. The ones that open themselves. Jess read that line aloud, and the room felt colder for it. I don't know if we were being logical anymore. Maybe we're just tired, desperate, terrified. But we made a plan. A stupid one. We stay in the kitchen tonight, I said. Face it directly. Jess didn't hesitate. Then we seal it. Off when we're done. We gathered what little we could, things that felt more symbolic than useful. A ring of salt, a crucifix from my drawer, candles for light. Jess found an old iron fireplace poker in the basement, just in case. It felt heavy in her hand, like it was meant to be held when afraid. The cabinets were shut tight. We sat facing them. We didn't speak. The clock ticked toward midnight. By 1:09, the kitchen air had turned dense again, a thick pressure like standing at the bottom of a lake. I couldn't move much. My arms felt like they were weighed down. Jess's breath was visible in the cold. Her fingers were white as she gripped the iron poker like it was a lifeline. 110. I whispered, "Don't run, no matter what we see." She nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. 1:11 a.m. Ooh. The cabinets burst open again, with a ferocity that blew out 2 of our candles. I winced at the noise. It felt like it cracked in my chest. But this time, we didn't look away. The air shifted. They came out. Shadow-thin figures, at least 6 of them, seeped from the cabinets like smoke made solid. Their hands gripped the door frames. Their bodies twitched and shuddered, unnaturally, heads lolling side to side. The symbols from the camera footage glowed faintly on the floor beneath them, pulsing. They didn't seem surprised to see us. They looked like they'd been waiting. One of them moved forward, its shape flickering like it existed in more than one place at once. No eyes, no mouth, just that void again, and those long hooked fingers. I gripped the crucifix tight and stood up, legs shaking. "Stay back," I warned it. It stopped. The others began to circle the cabinets, whispering in a language that made my teeth ache. Jess stood, raising the poker. "They're feeding on something," she whispered. "Emotion, fear." The lead figure inched forward again. I stepped between it and Jess, raising the crucifix, and this time, I swear to God, it recoiled. Its whole form twitched like it had been hit with an electric current. I pressed forward. "You're not welcome here," the other shadows hissed, curling back along the cabinet doors. Jess threw a line of salt between them and us. It hissed where it landed like acid on metal. The shadow tried to cross it, but it couldn't. Its hand passed over the salt and began to dissolve. Not smoke ash. The figure screamed not aloud, but inside our heads, like our minds were being scraped raw. Jess flung the poker at one of them. It passed right through, but the thing vanished, gone in a puff of black static. "They can be stopped," she shouted. Another shadow lunged. I shoved the crucifix forward and it exploded into nothing, a burst of ash and sparks. The rest began to shrink back, retreating through the cabins they came from. I slammed them shut, one by one, sealing each with a line of salt and whispered prayer. Jess took care of the lower cabinets, panting between words. The last shadow tried to lunge for her, but she slammed the door shut on its hand, and the thing wailed before it crumbled away. The kitchen went still. The cabinets were closed. The cold lifted. It was over. Or so we thought. The next day was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace, but like a warning. Jess and I didn't say much. We didn't need to. We were both exhausted, physically and emotionally. We'd seen things we couldn't explain, things that didn't belong in this world, but the cabinets had stayed shut all night. There were no bangs, no whispers, no flickering figures crawling out from the shadows. Still, I didn't feel safe. I felt watched. After Jess left to shower and grab a change of clothes, I tried to sit in the kitchen alone, just to prove to myself that I could. I made coffee, sat at the table, kept glancing at the cabinet doors, waiting for one of them to twitch. They didn't, but I noticed something else. A faint crackling sound. At first I thought it was the pipes. Old house, old plumbing made sense, right? But it wasn't coming from the ceiling. It was coming from the walls. I walked over and placed my hand against the drywall, cold. There was a faint vibration, like something moving behind it, something alive. A slow shift. Like breathing. I pulled my hand away. No, not doing that again. I called Jess back immediately. She heard the fear in my voice and didn't argue. I'll be there in 15. When she arrived, I showed her. She pressed her ear to the kitchen wall and listened. Her eyes widened. You hear that? She nodded slowly. It's not plumbing. The sound was rhythmic, hollow, like something was trapped back there, pacing, or worse, watching. We spent the rest of the day trying to pretend life was normal. Jess stayed over that night again, refusing to let me be alone. We ate frozen pizza, tried to watch a movie, but we couldn't stop staring at the kitchen. The clock ticked toward midnight. Again. We didn't want to believe it, but we knew. 1 a.m. The walls began to creak. A slow, stretching sound like wood being bent, just short of breaking. We both turned toward the kitchen at the same time. I grabbed the crucifix from the counter. Jess reached for the poker. Then came the knocking. Not on the door. Not from the cabinets. From inside the walls. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate. Just behind the plaster by the refrigerator. Then it moved crawling behind the wall toward the sink. Jess whispered, "It's still here. It just changed places." And then the whispering started again. Muffled, distorted like someone speaking underwater. You opened them. You let them in. I backed away from the wall, heart hammering. This house is hollow, Jess said suddenly. It's like it was built wrong. Like it wasn't meant to keep things out. It was meant to trap them inside. Her eyes locked on mine. Whatever we drove out of the cabinets, we didn't banish it. We just pushed it deeper. I felt a cold breath behind me and turned around. Nothing. But I could feel it. We heard another knock, this one right behind us in the living room wall. Jess screamed and threw the poker at the drywall. It struck with a dull thud and fell to the floor. Silence. Then something scratched back, like a finger dragging down from inside. We slept in the car that night. Neither of us uttered aloud. But we knew the kitchen was never the real problem. It was the house itself, and it was just beginning to wake up. We didn't sleep. Not in the car. Not the next night. Not after what we heard in the walls. By the third day, Jess was begging me to leave the house for good. Alex, just burn it down. Let it rot. You weren't meant to live here. But something in me wouldn't let go. It wasn't bravery, it was obsession. Something had been whispering to me for days now, not in my ears, but in my bones. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cabinets open again, but not in the kitchen in my mind. Endless rows of doors swinging wide into blackness, spilling out shadow, soundless screams echoing through invisible halls. I had to finish this. For me, for Jess, for the people who lived here before me, who died trying. The night I told Jess not to come back. And for the first time, I went back into the kitchen alone. But it wasn't just the cabinets anymore. The entire house felt like it was breathing. The floor flexed slightly under my steps. The air pulsed against my skin. I could hear the faintest hum low, continuous, like the walls were vibrating with some ancient buried frequency. I sat on the kitchen floor in the center of the room, surrounded by salt and candles. I brought the crucifix and a knife because somewhere deep inside, I knew this thing wanted more than fear. It wanted me. 1:08 a.m. The light dimmed, though. I hadn't touched the switch. 1:09. The whispers began deeper now, slower, like a voice that had waited a very long time. 1:10. The cabinets didn't open. The walls did. A crack formed in the drywall to my left, jagged and wet, like a wound opening. The paint peeled back. Black liquid oozed through the seams. I could hear something pushing forward from inside, scraping, twitching. The crack widened, and then it stepped out. Not a figure, not exactly. More like a shape that had once been human, but had forgotten how to hold itself together. Its arms were too long, its face a chasm of teeth and emptiness. Its skin pulsed like it was alive with other things crawling beneath it. It opened its mouth, and I heard nothing, but my head throbbed. Blood trickled from my nose. It reached for me. I held up the crucifix, shouting whatever I could. Prayers. Nonsense. It stopped. It tilted its head, studying me. Then it pointed to the floor, the wet symbol, the one we'd seen on the footage. I knew what it wanted. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to take its place, to open the door from the other side. The ritual that had started decades ago was never completed. That's what Alan Merritt had tried to stop. But the opening, the entry point, was a person. I was the key now. I stood up, heart pounding, and whispered, "You don't belong here." The thing hissed, more inside my skull than in the room. So I made a choice. I ran to the sink, grabbed the salt, and poured it in a circle around the symbol. I lit every candle I had. I took the crucifix and pressed it into the center of the sigil. The room began to shake. The figure screamed, soundless but mind-breaking. The cabinets flung open one final time, and the thing rushed toward me. As it lunged, I shouted the last word I could think of. The one that kept repeating in the walls, in the whispers, in the cabinets. Return, a flash of heat, a roar of pressure, then nothing. Silence. I woke up in the hallway. The kitchen door was shut, not a single cabinet open. No crack in the wall, no whisper in the air. It's been a week now. Jess moved away. I don't blame her. The house is quiet. I haven't heard a sound, but every night I wake up at 1:11 a.m. I walk to the kitchen. I stare at the closed cabinets, and I wait. Because one day I think they'll open again. And when they do, I used to love the quiet of this neighborhood. It was the kind of place where you could hear the wind rustling the trees, where neighbors nodded politely and disappeared into their lives, and where nothing ever really happened. Until last Tuesday. I remember it clearly. I was sitting in the living room with a mug of chamomile tea. My phone on silent, half listening to the soft hum of the TV. Everything was calm, ordinary. And then, at exactly 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't the sound itself that disturbed me. It was the timing so sharp, so perfect. Like the chime had been programmed to strike at exact moment down to the second. I wasn't expecting anyone. No packages, no visitors. I got up and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the quiet street outside, bathed in the soft afternoon light. Not a person in sight. Curious, I opened the door. The porch was empty. The yard looked untouched. The sidewalk clear. Not even a squirrel skittered by. I stepped out, checked the driveway, and even glanced behind the bushes. But there was no one. Maybe it was a kid messing around. A prank. I shrugged it off, went back inside, and tried to laugh at myself. I was already halfway back to my couch when I noticed it. The house felt colder. The air had gone still. Brushing off the sudden chill, I made myself another cup of tea and forgot about it. The next day, it happened again. Same time, same doorbell, same empty porch. That's when I stopped laughing. This time, I was standing just a few feet from the door when the chime rang. I darted to the peephole immediately, hoping to catch whoever it was. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not even a flicker of movement. I yanked the door open. Nothing. No footsteps on the path. No rustling from bushes. No pranksters sprinting away down the street. But as I stood there, I felt it again, that unnatural stillness. Not quiet, but expectant, like the world was holding its breath. And then I saw something that hadn't been there yesterday. A single footprint on the welcome mat. Wet, muddy, small. I stood there longer than I should have. The door open, the air prickling against my skin. Finally, I stepped back inside, locked the deadbolt, and pressed my back to the door. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped again. I could see my breath. The third day, I sat in the living room with every light on, watching the clock. 2:59 p.m., my heartbeat felt like a drum in my ears. 3 p.m., ding dong. I didn't move. This time, I just sat there, staring at the door. The sound was too clean, too deliberate. And for a brief second, I thought I heard something just after the bell, something faint, like a whisper. I stayed frozen in place for 5 full minutes before finally mustering the nerve to approach the door. Through the peephole, nothing. Porch, empty. But when I opened the door, a chill stronger than before rushed past me inward. And on the mat now were 2 wet footprints. I didn't sleep that night. And when I finally did, I dreamed of standing at the door with my hand on the knob, unable to open it, while something on the other side whispered my name. The doorbell doesn't just ring now. It waits. Something's out there. And it keeps getting closer. By the 4th day, my nerves were stretched thin. I couldn't sit still. Couldn't think. The doorbell had become an alarm one that didn't signal visitors, but something else. Something that didn't want to be seen, only felt. That day, I set an alarm for 2:55 p.m. and waited by the front window. I positioned myself behind the curtains, holding my breath as the minute hand inched toward 3 o'clock. I was going to catch it this time. I had to. The air grew heavy again, same as before. Still, cold. The world outside looked normal, but it didn't feel right. Like the colors had dulled. Like the sun was dimmer. 2:59. I gripped the curtain tighter. 3 o'clock. Ding dong. I whipped the curtain aside. No one. My heart hammered in my chest as I opened the door and stepped onto the porch, scanning everything: yard, sidewalk, neighbor's driveway. Nothing, but then I looked down. This time, the footprints didn't stop at the mat. They were more muddy, faint, almost child-sized, leading off the porch, across the sidewalk, and into the street. I followed them with my eyes until they just ended, midway across the pavement. They didn't fade gradually. They just stopped like someone had vanished into the air mid-step. I backed away slowly and closed the door, locking it with a shaking hand. I needed someone else to see this. I was starting to question my own sanity. That's when I called Megan. She didn't hesitate. Said she'd be over in an hour. When she arrived, I practically yanked her inside. "You think I'm crazy, right?" I asked, laughing nervously, though nothing about this felt funny anymore. "You sound ... scared," she said, her brow furrowed. "I just want to see for myself." We sat in silence as the hour crept toward 3 o'clock. Megan tried to distract me with small talk, but I barely heard her. Every tick of the clock made my chest tighter. When 2:59 hit, I stood up and motioned for her to join me at the door. "Are you serious?" she asked, a nervous laugh escaping her. "You really think this is going to ding dong?" The sound cut her off like a knife. She froze. I saw the color drain from her face when we opened the door together this time. Empty porch. Empty street. And then she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Lisa, look, there were footprints again. Fresh ones. Still wet. But not just at the mat. They stretched several feet forward. This time, they started at the doorstep and ended in the middle of the driveway. No sign of anyone walking away. No other tracks. Just a set of prints that appeared, then abruptly ceased as though someone had arrived, but never left." Megan slowly crouched to look closer. "They single quotes read ... small," she said. like a child's. She touched one lightly with her fingertip and recoiled. It's freezing. We both stood there for a moment, the cold wind brushing against our skin. Megan looked at me with wide eyes. You weren't making this up. I just nodded. It happens every day. Same time. Exactly. 3 o'clock. She didn't speak right away, just looked up the sidewalk, her lips pressed tight. We need to find out what this is. You can't keep doing this alone. For the first time all week, I felt the smallest bit of relief. Someone else believed me now. But that relief was short-lived, because I knew something Megan didn't. Yet, the doorbell wasn't just ringing anymore. It was escalating, and it wanted me to answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying what happened over and over the footprints. Megan's reaction, the cold that seeped into the air whenever the doorbell rang. It all seemed to revolve around that exact time, 3 p.m., as if someone was bound to. The next morning, I sat at a kitchen table with my laptop, the curtains drawn shut. I didn't want to see the front porch. I didn't want to feel the house watching me. I started digging. It took hours, but eventually I stumbled on something buried in a digital archive of old neighborhood newspapers. It was dated October 1982. The headline read, "Local boy vanishes without a trace after ringing neighbors' doorbells." My heart skipped a beat. The article said a boy named Caleb Martin, age 9, had gone missing. Witnesses claimed they saw him frantically ringing doorbells up and down the street, panicked. They said, like he was running from something. One of the last addresses mentioned was mine. I clicked on the grainy photo that accompanied the article. The boy wore a red jacket. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I'd seen that jacket before. Not on the street. Not in person. But on my doorbell cam, just for a second, a flash of red in the corner of the screen before the footage glitched out. I opened the app and rewound the camera feed to yesterday's recording. There it was just before the chime. A flicker, a distortion, and in that distortion, a red blur, a shape. My hand trembled as I pressed pause. I enhanced the frame. The quality was terrible, but I could just make it out. A boy's silhouette. Red jacket, zipped to the chin, face hidden by static. Caleb. I felt dizzy. A ghost? A memory? What was I looking at? I called Megan. You need to see this, I said. My voice shaking. It's a kid. A real one. From 40 years ago. She came right over, barely giving me time to unlock the door. I showed her the article, the footage, the red blur. She sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the screen. So you think ... it's him. Caleb? I don't know what else to believe. I whispered. What if he's still here? Still. Stuck? Trying to get someone to answer the door? Megan looked at the time stamp again. It's always 3 p.m. What if that was the time he... She didn't finish the thought. I didn't want her to. We agreed to try something. The next day, we sat in the foyer, doorbell camera recording, the laptop open beside us. This time, I left the door unlocked. 3 p.m. ticked closer. The air grew dense. Still. Freezing. 2:59. I heard it, not just the doorbell chime, but a whisper. Faint. Just behind the door. Please. Ding dong. The sound was louder than ever, like it was being rung from inside the house. I lunged forward and yanked open the door, and there he was. A boy. Red jacket. He stood on the porch, trembling, staring at me. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Behind him, the sky looked wrong gray, and pulsing like a storm frozen in time. Caleb? I asked, barely breathing. He looked at me, through me, and then past me, into the house. Don't let it in, he mouthed. Before I could say a word, he vanished. Not blinked away. Not ran. Just faded, like a projection turned off. I stepped back, heart racing, but Megan screamed, Lisa, behind you. I turned, and felt the air bend inward, like the house was breathing in. I spun around, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The house felt like it had shifted subtly, but enough. The walls seemed closer. The air buzzed, dense and alive. pressing against my skin like static before a lightning strike. Lisa, Megan whispered from behind me. Something's in here. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew she was right. The front door was still wide open, but the light outside had dimmed unnaturally fast. The late afternoon sun had vanished. The world beyond the porch looked warped, the trees bent at unnatural angles. The sky was a dull shade of gray-green, like we weren't in the same neighborhood anymore. I slammed the door shut. The moment I did, every light in the house flickered. Then the whisper came again, this time, from inside. Let me in. It came from the hallway, then again closer. Let me in. It echoed from the kitchen. Megan backed toward me, eyes darting. Around. Where is it coming from? I don't know, I whispered. But it's getting louder. We moved through the house together, checking room by room. The hallway light buzzed and sputtered. The shadows in the corners pulsed. The sound of footsteps bare, slow, dragging followed us. But every time we turned around, there was nothing, until we reached the mirror in the upstairs hall. It was a simple, full-length mirror mounted on the wall, one I'd walk past every day, without a second thought. But now, it was fogged over from the inside, and behind the haze, something was moving. The whisper came again, louder. Clear, let me in. The fog parted just enough for me to see a face pressed against the other side of the glass distorted. Featureless, like it had been smeared with hands made of smoke. Then two long, pale hands slid across the inside of the mirror, scraping the surface with fingernails I couldn't hear but could feel in my teeth. I staggered back. Megan screamed. The mirror cracked. A thin fracture ran down the center. Then another. The crack spread like a spider web, and from within it, the thing started to push. Its fingers curled out, first stretching from the glass like it was made of liquid shadow. Then came a wrist. Then an arm. Slender, sickly, endless. Get the salt, I shouted, remembering what worked before. Megan dashed into the kitchen while I stood frozen, watching as the figure pulled itself halfway out of the mirror, its face still featureless. Its movements jerky, like broken marionette strings being yanked. She returned seconds later, tossing a canister of salt toward me. I grabbed it and flung a fistful at the figure. It shrieked, not in my ears, but in my mind. The sound rattled something inside my skull, like nails dragging across a chalkboard buried behind my eyes. The figure reeled back, convulsing violently before snapping back into the mirror like a rubber band pulled too tight. Then shatter. The mirror exploded outward in a rain of shards. We ducked, shielding ourselves as glass peppered the hallway. When I looked up, the mirror frame was empty. Just a dark hole in the wall, like a window looking into nothing. The house fell silent again, but it wasn't over. From down the stairs, the doorbell rang. 3 p.m. Again. I checked the clock. It was 3:07. I looked at Megan. It's not following the rules anymore. She swallowed hard, her face pale. Then neither should we. The doorbell rang again twice in a row. Then 3 more times, fast, as if whoever or whatever was out there was getting impatient. Megan and I didn't move. We stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the staircase like it might reach up and grab us. Then the walls began to thump. It started low, like something shifting behind the drywall. Then it got louder. The sound of scraping, like fingernails dragging across the beams inside the house, it traveled quickly from downstairs to upstairs until it was right behind us. The entire house groaned. We ran. We bolted into my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I grabbed the dresser and pushed it in front of the door while Megan locked the windows. The thumping moved to the other side of the wall, the inside wall, the one that connected to the hallway. Then we heard it again. Let me in. But this time, it didn't sound like a whisper. It sounded like a voice being dragged across a gravel road. Broken, grinding, and it was right behind the wall. I pressed my ear to it, heart hammering. Beneath the drywall, I could hear the thing breathing and scratching. Lisa, Megan, sighed shakily, pointing toward the floor. There, Right beneath the baseboard, a crack had begun to form. A thin, black line, almost like rot, spreading up the wall like a creeping infection. From inside it, we heard something dripping wet and slow. What the hell is that? She asked, backing away. I don't know, I whispered. But it's trying to break through. Then the floorboards began to vibrate. From the closet came a sudden bang, then another. We turned toward it just as the door swung open. Inside was nothing but coats. And a perfect hole carved into the back of the closet wall, about the size of a dinner plate. And from that hole, cold air poured into the room like a leaking freezer. Something inside the hole was breathing and whispering. This time, the voice was clear, familiar. I stepped closer and almost fell to my knees. It was my own voice whispering back at me. Let me in. Megan screamed, slamming the closet shut. We're leaving, she said. We're getting out of this house now. She didn't have to say it twice. I grabbed my keys and my phone. We ran, bursting down the stairs, every light flickering violently as we passed. The doorbell rang again, frenzied now, a dozen times in quick succession. I reached for the knob, but the moment my fingers touched it, the whole house went silent. I opened the door, and outside, it wasn't my neighborhood anymore. The street was gone. The porch was suspended in a void stretching out into endless gray mist. The trees, the sidewalk, the houses all gone. There was nothing but a faint hum, like a massive engine turning beneath the world. Megan looked at me, her face as pale as bone. We're not supposed to leave, she whispered. I slammed the door shut and locked it again. That's when we heard a new sound, not scratching, not a whisper, a knock, from inside the attic. We stared at the ceiling above the staircase, where the attic door sat untouched. Knock, knock, knock. And then, faintly, let me in. The knocking above us continued slow, deliberate, like it was waiting to be answered. Megan gripped my arm so tightly I could feel her nails through my skin. We can't go up there, she whispered. But deep down, I already knew we would. Something wanted in. And something in me, some quiet buried part, needed to see it, to understand. I grabbed the flashlight from the hallway drawer and stared at the ceiling. The attic door sat flush against the plaster, the string dangling. Like a noose, each knock that followed vibrated down the walls and into my chest. Knock, 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 then silence. I reached up slowly, grabbed the string, and pulled. The attic door opened with a groan that sounded more like a scream, and the wooden stairs unfolded downward, creaking, trembling. A rush of cold air spilled out. It smelled like wet leaves. And something long dead. We waited, listening. Nothing. Just that heavy, choking silence. I'm coming with you, Megan said, her voice small. I nodded. Together we climbed. Each step moaned under our weight. The beam of the flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of old boxes, insulation, spiderwebs thick enough to look like netting. But something was wrong. The attic was far too big. It stretched into the darkness impossibly far, like the house had expanded into a space that shouldn't exist. The walls were warped, pulsing slightly like the house itself was breathing. Then we saw it. In the center of the attic was an old, rusted door, just standing there, not attached to anything. Just a doorframe, like someone had dropped it into the middle of an endless attic. And it was ringing. A doorbell chime, but distorted, slowed down to a horrible groan. Each note made the air thrum, the dust vibrate. Ding-ga-da-da-dong. We approached. Slowly. On the other side of the door, the wood was rotting, blackened around the edges. Carved into the center, with jagged, shaking strokes, was one word. Welcome. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. No caller ID. Just a single message. You've already let me in. The flashlight dimmed and then died. In the dark, we heard. The knob began to turn. We both screamed, stumbling backward, but the door swung open, and beyond it was not the attic. It was a long hallway, drenched in flickering yellow light, wallpaper peeling from the walls. At the far end was the front door to my house, but it was upside down. The floor was the ceiling. Gravity itself seemed reversed, yet the space somehow felt familiar, like a warped memory of my home. Footsteps echoed down the hall fast, frantic. Then we saw him. The boy in the red jacket, running toward us, terrified, his mouth open in a silent scream. Something chased him, something huge and formless. Its outline twitching like a glitch, its head nearly scraping the warped ceiling. The boy reached the threshold of the open door, and the thing caught him. In an instant, he was gone. The hallway evaporated to blackness. The door slammed shut so hard it shook the entire attic. Dust rained from the rafters. And then the chime rang out one last time soft, almost tender. Ding dong, we bolted. Down the steps, through the hallway, out the front door. This time, the street was back. The houses, the sun. But the doorbell was still ringing, even though it was no longer connected. Even now, I can hear it sometimes, echoing in my head. At 3 p.m., Megan won't talk about what happened. Neither will I, but we both know the truth. The boy never left. And whatever took him is still ringing that doorbell. Because one day, someone will open it again. And this time, they won't be able to close it. When I stepped back into my childhood home for the first time in 20 years, I expected to feel nostalgic, maybe even a little sad. But the moment I crossed the threshold, something inside me shifted. The air was heavier than I remembered. Colder. Dust coated every surface like a second skin, and the walls, once comforting and familiar, now loomed over me with quiet hostility. Then I heard it. A soft melody drifting through the silence like smoke, delicate, almost tender. But beneath it was something wrong, twisted. Each note sent a chill through my spine. I stopped in my tracks, listening. No, it couldn't be. That lullaby. I hadn't heard it since I was a child. Not since the nightmares. Not since the nights I woke up screaming while my mother insisted it was just a dream, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't imagining it now. The song was real, weaving its way through the rotting wallpaper and creaking floorboards, wrapping around me like a cold, skeletal hand. I followed it, down the dim hallway where the light bulbs flickered overhead. My fingers brushed along the faded walls as I made my way toward the nursery. The door was still shut tight, just like it had always been. Even as a kid, I had never been able to open it. My mother told me it was sealed because of water damage, but that was a lie. I know that now. Because something was calling from the other side. I reached for the doorknob, but it refused to turn. Locked, as always. The song stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was even worse. My skin prickled. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I didn't. I turned away and climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. That place had always scared me more than the rest of the house. It was where the past clung the tightest, where my mother's secrets had been packed away and dusty. Boxes and hidden behind moth-eaten quilts. I rummaged through the junk, trying to distract myself, until my fingers brushed something cold and smooth. A music box. I pulled it free from a pile of linens. Small, wooden, intricately carved. The key on its side looked rusted with age, yet it turned easily beneath my fingers. The melody that poured out was unmistakable, the same twisted lullaby. From the hallway, my hands trembled as I held it. This box. This was the source. It had to be. But if that was true, then why had I heard the song before I found it? The attic around me grew colder. I could see my breath fogging in the air, and then just behind me a soft giggle. A child's laugh, high-pitched, innocent, but wrong, so very wrong. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just shadows creeping along the rafters and the moonlight casting distorted shapes through the broken window. Still, I could feel it, that presence, like eyes watching from the dark. The giggle faded into a whisper, so faint I couldn't make out the words. That was the first night the house tried to speak to me. And I knew, in that moment, the lullaby wasn't just a song. It was a memory And memories have a way of clawing back through the cracks, especially the ones you try hardest to forget. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the attic, even after I forced myself to put the music box back under the quilts where I found it, the melody clung to me. It followed me through the halls, a faint hum in the back of my skull, like it had burrowed into my mind. Every floorboard creak, every whisper of wind outside sounded like another note of that twisted lullaby. By morning, I convinced myself. I'd imagined it. Stress, maybe. Coming back here was bound to stir something up, and sleep deprivation only made it worse. But then I walked past the nursery again. The door was open, just slightly, a crack. Enough to see that same pale wallpaper I hadn't laid eyes on in 2 decades. I stopped, heart pounding, mouth dry. I hadn't touched that door. I knew I hadn't. And yet, it was ajar as if inviting me in. I pushed it open slowly. The nursery looked frozen, preserved somehow. Like time had stopped inside. Dust blanketed the crib, the shelves, the rocking horse by the window. But nothing had decayed. The wallpaper, though yellowed, still clung to the walls. The mobile above the crib still turned lazily, its faded stuffed animals spinning silently. And in the corner sat a small wooden chair. On it was a doll. I hadn't remembered it until that moment, but seeing it again brought a wave of nausea. Porcelain face, dark glass eyes that never blinked, and a frilly white dress now tinged with gray. I used to hate that thing. My mother said it belonged to someone else, an older cousin, maybe, long gone. But I remember the way I used to wake up and find it sitting in places I hadn't left it, watching. I took a hesitant step inside. The air was ice cold. I could see my breath again, just like in the attic. I crossed the room slowly, unsure why I was even doing it, why I felt drawn to the crib in the center of the room. I reached out and gripped the edge. That's when the music box started playing again. I hadn't touched it. I was nowhere near the attic, but the song drifted down from about her now, clearer, and beneath the melody, that same child's voice giggling, whispering my name, not once, over and over. Thomas, Thomas. I backed out of the nursery, pulling the door closed behind me. I didn't lock it. I didn't even think to. Some part of me knew it wouldn't matter. If something wanted out, a locked door wasn't going to stop it. I tried to leave the house then. I really did. I grabbed my keys, threw open the front door, and stopped. Because at the base of the front steps, standing half in shadow, was a little girl. Her dress was white and torn at the hem. Her feet were bare even though the ground was still covered in early winter frost. Her hair hung in damp clumps over her face. She didn't look up. She just stood there. Then she started humming, the same melody. I slammed the door shut. The house groaned around me, like it was laughing, like it had been waiting for me all this time. I leaned back against the door, heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't about coincidence. This wasn't some psychological breakdown. Something was haunting this place, and somehow I was part of it. I couldn't stay in the front hall, not with her out there. I turned every lock on the door and slid the deadbolt with shaking hands, then backed away until my legs hit the base of the stairs. The lullaby had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It was expectant. As if the house had drawn a long breath and was just ... waiting. I climbed the stairs one slow step at a time. I didn't even know why. I just knew I had to. Be moving. Had to stay ahead of whatever was closing in. I tried calling Megan, an old friend from college. No signal. No bars. I stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed me. As I passed the second-floor hallway, the nursery door was open again, wide open, and the doll was gone from the chair. I didn't stop. Couldn't. I went straight to my childhood bedroom, shut the door, and locked it behind me. Everything inside was just as I'd left it years ago, posters peeling from the walls. The dresser nicked and scarred from 1,000 careless moments, and my childhood bed sitting perfectly made, as though my mother had come through one last time to straighten. The sheets! I sat on the edge of it, trying to make sense of everything. The lullaby, the doll, the girl. Her eyes haunted me, the way they seemed wrong, like they weren't eyes at all, but holes in the world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, clutching a flashlight like it was a weapon. The door locked, the windows closed tight. The silence stretched on and on, broken only by the groaning of the old house. I started to drift, my mind heavy with fear. And then the closet door creaked open, just an inch. I sat bolt upright. The flashlight beam shook as I turned it toward the closet. Nothing, just hanging clothes and old boxes. But the door hadn't been open. I knew it hadn't. I would have noticed. I tried to tell myself it was just old hinges, just the house settling. That's when I heard it breathing, not mine. A slow, steady inhale, and then an exhale, ragged. What? I aimed the flashlight directly at the closet and took a shaky step forward. Hello? I whispered. No answer. But the breathing continued. I stepped closer. My heart was thundering. I reached out and flung the closet door open the rest of the way empty, but only for a second. Because as I lowered the flashlight, I saw something move in the far back corner, something low. I knelt slowly, angling the beam of light downward. That's when I saw the face. Small, pale, tilted at an unnatural angle, like the neck had been broken and never set right. Her eyes reflected the light, glowing slightly like an animal's. Her mouth twitched, trying to form something, maybe a word, maybe a scream. I stumbled back, hitting the wall behind me, and the flashlight flickered. Then she was gone. Just gone. I stared at the empty space for a long time, the light trembling in my grip. Then something else caught my eye on the inside of the closet door. I moved the beam of light slowly across it. Scratches, hundreds of them. Deep gouges carved into the wood, overlapping, desperate. I traced one with my finger and felt something sharp embedded in it. I plucked it free. A fingernail. I barely made it to the bathroom before I vomited. This wasn't just a haunting. This house was trying to remember, even if I didn't. But I was starting to... The girl, the game, the door that never opened, and the lullaby, always playing, always just around the corner. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. The girl in white, her two-eyed smile and bottomless eyes staring straight through me. I could still hear the sound of her breath, ragged and cold, echoing through my skull. By morning, I felt like I'd aged years. I couldn't ignore the memories anymore. They were bubbling up like rot under the surface. Flashes of childhood afternoons. Rain against the window. Games I hadn't thought about in decades. And her, I didn't know her name. I didn't even remember her being real. But she was. I could feel it now. After choking down half a cup of stale coffee, I went back upstairs. The nursery door was closed again, but now a faint humming was coming from behind it. That damned lullaby. I stood there for a moment, hand trembling near the doorknob. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to be afraid anymore. I went to the attic and grabbed a crowbar. If the answers were in that room, I was going to drag them out, whether the house liked it or not. The nursery was exactly as I remembered. Faded wallpaper, cracked rocking horse, and the dusty mobile still turning slowly over the empty crib, though there was no draft. The air felt denser here, as if the room held its breath every time I entered. I searched everything, the walls, the closet, under the rug. Nothing but that music box melody. It was louder in here, almost pulsing, like it was coming from beneath my feet. I froze, and then I saw it, a seam, barely visible, running across the old floorboards under the crib. I moved the crib aside and knelt, brushing away layers of dust. It was a trapdoor, maybe a crawl space, maybe a forgotten cellar hatch. I hadn't known it was there. I didn't remember it being there. I wedged the crowbar into the edge and pried it open with a screech that set my teeth on edge. The smell hit me first. Damp wood, mildew, and something else. Something sweet and rotten. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it down. A shallow cavity, no more than 2 feet deep, stretched out under the floorboards. Dust clung to everything like thick ash. But at the center, half buried in dirt and cobwebs, lay a bundle of cloth, a child's blanket, and something rocked inside it. My throat tightened as I reached down. The moment my fingers touched the blanket, the lullaby stopped, cut off mid-note. I lifted the bundle slowly, the weight of it heavier than I expected. The cloth unwrapped itself almost willingly. Inside was a small, decaying stuffed bear, its eyes missing, its seams torn. Beneath it, a girl's shoe, faded pink, stained dark around the edges, and something else, bones, small, brittle, the kind you'd expect from a bird or a child. I staggered back, dropping the bundle. The flashlight slipped from my hand, spinning across the floor and casting frantic shadows against the wall. That's when the humming started again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was right behind me. I turned. She stood in the doorway, no longer flickering, no longer half seen. She was there, pale, dirty, barefoot, the same tattered white dress, the same stringy hair. Her head tilted slowly to one side, and her mouth moved as she hummed a cursed lullaby in a cracked, uneven voice. "You found me," she whispered. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor. My mind screamed at me to run, to leave the house and never come back, but my body betrayed me. She stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound. Her dark eyes bore into mine. "Do you remember now?" My mouth opened, but no words came out. My heart was slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "I waited," she said, voice thin and trembling. "I waited so long, but you forgot me." "I didn't know," I croaked. "I didn't remember." Her expression twisted into sorrow so deep it felt like gravity. "You were supposed to find me," she whispered. "You promised." She pointed at the bundle behind me. "But you left me here, alone." I didn't realize I was crying until the tears hit my shirt. I dropped to my knees and bowed my head. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I was a kid. I didn't understand. I didn't know you were real." For a moment, the room was silent. Then I heard her soft footsteps, felt the air shift as she knelt beside me. Her cold hand touched mine, and for the first time, the lullaby changed. It slowed, softened, became almost gentle. "I forgive you," she whispered, her voice like a breeze through dead leaves. Then the light flickered, and she was gone. The music box on the floor wound down with one final note. The shadows in the corners pulled back. The nursery felt empty again, but in a different way, like something had finally moved on. For the first time in days, the house was silent. Not the kind of silence that hums with hidden menace, but the kind that lets you breathe again. I sat on the nursery floor for what felt like hours, listening to the nothingness, daring the lullaby to come back. It never did. Eventually, I carried the small bundle from under the floorboards outside. I didn't know what to do with it. How do you bury something like that? I didn't call anyone. Who would I even tell? That I'd found a child's remains under my childhood nursery, and her ghost had been singing to me? I wrapped her in a new blanket, clean and warm, and buried her beneath the big oak tree in the backyard. The same tree we used to play under as kids. I spoke her name, Emily, as if saying it would pull her out of the shadows of my memory. I still didn't remember everything, but I remembered enough. She had been my cousin. She came to stay with us one summer. We were close. We played games, laughed, even made a secret fort in the attic, and one day, she went missing. My parents told me she had gone back home, that her mom came to get her early. I had believed them, but it was a lie. And somewhere in my mind, I must have always known. That night, I slept. No nightmares, no music box, just rest. The next few days were quiet, peaceful, even. I started cleaning up the house, clearing out the attic, thinking maybe I could actually live here again. Maybe Emily's forgiveness had lifted whatever darkness clung to this place. But peace never stays long in houses like this. It was Thursday when I noticed the change. I had just come back from getting groceries, and the nursery door was open. I hadn't opened it since the burial. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I stepped inside. Everything was the same. For one thing, the music box. It was back on the floor, exactly where I had left it the first time. I knelt down slowly, staring at it, my pulse thudding behind my ears. I hadn't touched it in days. I hadn't even thought about it since the night she disappeared. But there it was, closed, still, waiting. I reached out and turned the key. Nothing happened. No music, no lullaby. Just silence. I set it down and backed out of the room, closing the door gently behind me. Maybe it was just a leftover piece of the past. Maybe some memory, some grief, just echo through time longer than others. That's what I told myself, until the next day. 3:33 a.m. I woke up to the sound of something moving in the hallway. Not footsteps, dragging, something being pulled. I sat up in bed, heart hammering in my chest. The dragging sound grew louder, slow, deliberate, as if whatever it was didn't care how much noise it made. I forced myself to get up, grabbing the flashlight from my nightstand. The hallway was empty. But there, just outside the nursery, was a trail, a faint line carved into the dusty floorboards, as if someone had been dragging something heavy ... or someone. I followed it, flashlight trembling in my hand. The nursery door was cracked open again. Inside, the rocking horse was moving, rocking back and forth, slowly, creaking with every shift of weight, but there was no one there. Then my flashlight flickered, and I saw her, not Emily, someone else, a second child, another girl, hair matted and black, her skin gray and thin. She sat in the far corner of the room, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and empty, and she was humming. Not the same lullaby, a different song, a new one I'd never heard before. She looked at me and whispered, "She said you'd come back." My blood turned to ice. The door behind me slammed shut. I stood frozen, staring into the darkness where the second child sat. Her humming was soft, disjointed, like she didn't know the tune herself. The melody crawled across the room, reaching into my chest and twisting something deep inside. It wasn't just fear now, it was grief and guilt. "She said you'd come back," the girl repeated, tilting her head in that slow, unnatural way. "But you're too late again." My voice cracked when I finally found it. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. She simply stood. As she did, the room shifted. It didn't creak or moan, it changed. The walls pulsed like lungs exhaling old air, and the shadows around her seemed to peel away from the corners. The wallpaper began to fade, revealing something painted beneath. Small handprints in red, smeared across the wall. The girl walked toward the wall and placed her hand directly on one of them. "This is where we waited," she said, "for a long time." "We," I whispered. She turned to me, and suddenly her eyes were full, not just hollow darkness, but memories, pain. There were more of us. The floor beneath my feet felt like it was sinking. I gripped the door handle behind me, but it wouldn't move. Locked. Again. "I don't know you," I said, shaking my head. "I only remember Emily." "She remembered us," the girl said. "Even after she forgot how we died?" A sound filled the room, then scraping. Behind me, on the far side of the nursery, the dresser trembled. It started to slide on its own, revealing a narrow panel in the wall. A crawl space. "No," I muttered. I didn't want to know what was behind it. But something was pulling me toward it, just like it had pulled me to the attic, to the lullaby, to Emily. The girl was gone now, vanished without a sound. The humming stopped. The crawl space yawned open. I crouched down and peered inside. The smell hit me first, damp wood, rot, and something else. Old, like something that had been sealed away too long. With a shaking hand, I lifted my flashlight and crawled inside. The space was narrow, the floorboards damp and soft beneath my hands. As I moved forward, I saw what I had feared most. Bones. 3 small skeletons. All curled together, their arms around one another, like they'd been hiding or trapped. I covered my mouth, bile rising in my throat. In the dim beam of my flashlight, I saw something scrawled on the back wall in faded red paint. We sang to stay awake. My head spun. I backed out of the crawl space and collapsed on the nursery floor, shaking. It hadn't just been Emily. She had never been alone. And I had never been the only one who heard the lullabies. All this time, the house had been whispering, trying to remind me, not just of what I had forgotten, but of what everyone had chosen. To bury, when I finally managed to stand, I knew what I had to do. I called the police, reported the bones, gave them everything, the music box, the history, the names from the articles I finally found in the town archives. It made the news. The house was declared a crime scene. I was cleared, thanks to the decades that had passed. But even now, after the headlines faded and the house was torn down, I still hear them. Every night at 3:33 a.m., just as I drift off to sleep, a soft melody plays. It's not from a music box. It comes from inside me. I think they planted it there. A lullaby meant to remind me, forever, that I loved them, that they waited, and that the forgotten never stay silent. I was sitting in my dimly lit living room, bundled up under a blanket, listening to the rain hammering against the windows when it came the knock. It was soft at first, hesitant, like whoever was outside wasn't sure they wanted to be heard. Or maybe they were hoping I wouldn't. I paused, holding my tea mid-sip, ears straining. I glanced at my phone. 12:43 a.m. A cold dread slid down my spine. I live alone, in a quiet apartment building where nothing ever happens. No late-night visitors, no party neighbors, and certainly no one knocking at my door in the middle of a thunderstorm. My first thought was that maybe someone was in trouble, lost, locked out, but even that didn't feel right. I waited. Another knock, louder, 3 deliberate pounds this time. My hand trembled slightly as I set down my mug. I rose slowly from the couch, every nerve in my body tightening. The only sound now was the storm, the hiss of rain, and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. No voices, no footsteps. Just that heavy silence that made the walls feel like they were listening. I padded barefoot across the living room carpet toward the front door. I hesitated a foot away from it, heart pounding. My fingers hovered over the deadbolt, not unlocking it yet. "Who's there?" I asked, voice hoarse and low, barely above a whisper. No reply. I waited 10 seconds, then 20. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dim yellow light of the hallway, flickering slightly. The narrow corridor outside my door stretched out in both directions. Empty. No movement, no shadow. I felt a twist in my gut. There should have been someone. There had to be. I knew what I heard. I unlocked the deadbolt and slowly cracked the door open. The cold, wet air hit me like a slap. The smell of rain and something else, something damp and old flooding in. I opened it a bit wider and peeked out. No one was there. But something was. A dark, wet patch stained the floor, just beyond the threshold. It looked like water, at least I told myself that. But it was thick, too dark, and shimmered oddly beneath the flickering hallway light. My eyes locked onto it. A sense of dread blew me in my chest. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. Just as I was reaching to shut the door, something cold brushed past my ear. A whisper, so soft I could have imagined it. But I didn't let me in. I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt, heart hammering. I stood there for a second, my back pressed against the door, chest rising and falling with sharp, panicked breaths. The apartment felt colder than before. The windows creaked under the pressure of the wind, and every shadow in the room seemed to grow longer, darker. I turned on the TV some generic sitcom was playing, its laugh track echoing hollowly. The sound helped, barely. I stared at the screen, not watching, just listening. I needed noise. I needed to not hear whatever that was outside. Minutes passed. I started to calm down, convincing myself I'd imagined the whisper. It had to be the wind. Maybe the pipes. Then, bang, bang, bang. The door rattled violently under the force of the pounding. My body froze, then jolted into motion. I jumped. From the couch, phone clutched tight in my hand, pulse racing. The knocking was heavier now, angry. I crept back to the door and peered through the peephole again. Nothing. Just the hallway. Empty. Silent. The knocking continued. Panic clawed at my throat. I wanted to scream, to tell whoever it was to leave, but something inside me refused to make a sound. I couldn't give whatever was out there the satisfaction. Then the knocking stopped. Silence again. But worse this time. Thick, expectant, and then came the scratching. Slow, deliberate, like nails or claws dragging down the wood of the door. It scraped from top to bottom, paused, and began again. I backed away from the door, the phone slick in my grip. My hand shook as I opened the security contact from the apartment complex's directory. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then, security, a man's groggy voice answered. There's someone at my door, I said quickly. They're knocking dash scratching. Won't stop. The scratching stopped. I could still hear it echoing in my head, but the apartment had gone quiet again. The security guy was silent for a second. You say someone's at your door? Yes, I hissed. They knocked, then whispered. Then scratched the damn door. They're still out there. A pause. All right, I'll come check. The line went dead. I stared at the door, waiting for the pounding to return, but the silence just sat there like a weight. I leaned my head against the wall, trying to steady my breath. Then, from behind me barely above a whisper, I heard it again. You shouldn't have answered. You shouldn't have answered? The voice was so close, it felt like it had come from right behind me, like someone had leaned in close, their lips brushing my ear. I spun around, flashlight from my phone shaking in my trembling grip, but there was nothing there. Just the quiet, dim glow of the TV flickering against the walls. I was alone. I had to be alone. My throat tightened as I backed into the living room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The laughter from the sitcom played mockingly, each chuckle like a needle jabbed into my nerves. I fumbled with the remote and shut it off. Silence fell again, heavy, dense. I stood still, straining to hear anything, footsteps, breathing. Another whisper, but the only thing I could make out was the wind and the occasional creak of the apartment walls shifting. And yet, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. That's something new. I'd opened the door. But it was still here, with me, inside. I slowly turned back to the hallway. My phone's flashlight scanned the narrow space, and that's when I saw them footprints. Dark, wet prints tracked across the hardwood floor of my entry, leading away from the door and into the depths of my apartment. I hadn't seen them before. They hadn't been there when I first opened the door, I was sure of it. But now, there they were, smeared and slick, as if something heavy and dripping had stepped inside while I wasn't looking. My chest tightened. I crept toward them. Each step I took closer made my stomach twist. The prints led down the hallway that branched off into my bedroom, the bathroom, the coat closet. My breathing quickened, coming out in sharp clouds of condensation. I could see my breath now. The air was freezing. I should have run. I should have left the apartment and never looked back. But instead, I followed. My bare feet were cold against the floor. The hallway grew darker, like the shadows were thickening around me. My phone's flashlight flickered, then steadied, casting a weak glow ahead. The footprints ended at my bedroom door. Closed. I hadn't closed it earlier. I was certain I'd left it open when I last came out. A faint creak echoed behind me. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. Another creak this time in front of me. From inside the bedroom. Something was in there. I inched forward, hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold to the touch. I hesitated, listening. No breathing, no movement. Just the occasional crack of thunder from outside and the dull hum of my own blood in my ears. Then, from behind the door, I heard a faint shuffle. A dragging sound, something moving across the floor. I yanked my hand back. Nope, I muttered, backing away. I turned and bolted into the living room, grabbing the house keys off the table. And running for the front door, I unlocked it, yanked it open, and stopped. The hallway outside had changed. It was wrong. Instead of the familiar beige walls and framed building notices, the corridor was bathed in red emergency light. The walls looked aged peeling wallpaper, exposed beams beneath like cracked bone. The flickering overhead bulb cast long, jagged shadows, and at the far end of the hall stood a figure, unmoving, just standing, facing me. I couldn't see their face, not in the dimness, but I could tell they were tall. Their bodies slightly hunched, arms too long, head tilted unnaturally to one side. The light above them flickered, then blinked out. When it flickered back on, the figure was gone. My skin went ice cold. I slammed the door shut again, throwing every bolt and lock I had. Then came the whisper from inside the apartment. Too late. Every light in the apartment went out. My phone's flashlight stuttered and died, plunging me into total darkness. I fumbled wildly in my pocket for the phone, hitting buttons, trying to turn on anything, but it wouldn't respond. It was completely dead. A second passed, then another. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, shuffling, deliberate. They were in the hallway again. Getting closer. Slow, dragging. The same uneven gait I'd heard earlier. The same sound from behind the bedroom door. I held my breath, pressed my back to the wall, too afraid to move. My eyes strained in the darkness. Every inch of my body begged me to run, but to where? The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then my bedroom door creaked open. The hinges groaned, the sound echoing like a scream in the dark. I could hear the faint creak of floorboards as something stepped out. It was moving slowly down the hallway now. Toward the living room, toward me. I backed into the kitchen, fumbling blindly for something, anything to defend myself with. My hands closed around the knife. I gripped it tight, positioning myself behind the kitchen island, just as the silhouette emerged into view. It was tall, slender, its limbs too long, too angular. Its face was indistinct in the dark, but its eyes, if they were even eyes, shone faintly, like smoldering coals in the black. It didn't speak. It just stood there, breathing, watching. Then it stepped forward. I screamed. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. Not a startled yelp, not a cry for help. This was raw, primal terror pouring from my lungs as that thing took another step forward. The silhouette twitched, its limbs jerking unnaturally, like a puppet with tangled strings. Its glowing eyes never blinked, never wavered, just fixed on me, locked like a predator staring down prey. I clutched the kitchen knife, my grip so tight my knuckles turned white. I raised it like I thought it would matter. But somehow, deep down, I already knew. It wouldn't. The thing moved again. Only now it was faster. It glitched forward one moment at the edge of the living room, the next barely 10 feet from where I stood. I staggered back, knocking over a chair. My body screamed at me to run, to flee, to do something, but I was frozen, locked in a nightmare that no longer felt like reality. It tilted its head again, that horrible angle that made it seem like its neck was broken. The air grew colder. My breath was fogging the space between us. My ears were ringing with silence, except for its breathing. Deep, wet, like it had drowned long ago and forgotten how to stop. Then it whispered again, "Let me in." I didn't. I gasped. "I didn't invite you." It smiled. God help me, it smiled. Not with lips, but with its whole face. Its jaw stretched wider than it should have, revealing rows of teeth, not sharp, but cracked and crumbling, like they'd been rotting in a grave. "You opened the door," it rasped. "You listened." It twitched again, closer. Panicked, I hurled the knife. It passed straight through it. Not like it missed now. I saw the blade hit, but it didn't sink, didn't stop. It just sliced through like through smoke, vanishing into the wall behind. The thing shuddered, its form rippling like mist in a gale. Then it laughed low, guttural, a noise that didn't sound right in this world. It stepped forward again. I backed away blindly, bumping into the fridge. It was close enough now that I could see the texture of its skin, or what I thought was skin. It looked more like wax melted over bone lumpy, dripping, glistening as if wet with something foul. I turned and ran, not thinking, not choosing, just running. I threw myself down the hallway, heart hammering against my ribs. My only thought was the front door. Get to the door, get out. I skidded to a stop. The door was gone. I stood where? It should have been panting, sweating, staring at a blank wall. No door, no frame, no handle, just smooth plaster, seamless and still. No, no, no. I backed up, turned around. The hallway had changed. It should have led to the bedroom and bathroom, but now it was long, impossibly long, stretching into shadows that shouldn't exist in a one-bedroom apartment. Behind me, that laugh came again, closer. I turned and ran blindly into the new hallway, walls closing in like a tunnel. It was endless. My feet slapped against hardwood that didn't look like mine. The walls were too tall, the ceiling too far. The whole thing pulsed faintly, like a throat swallowing me. I ran and ran, till I was breathless. Then suddenly, wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was in my bedroom. Just like that, as if the hallway spat me out. I stumbled in, falling to my knees. The light above flickered. The room was cold, deathly silent. My bed sat neatly made. The dresser was exactly where I left it. The curtains fluttered even though the windows were closed. Everything was normal. Too normal. I stood up slowly, chest heaving. Had I hallucinated? A waking nightmare? A panic attack? Then I heard it again. Breathing, but not mine. I looked up. The thing was on the ceiling, pressed flat against it like some monstrous insect. Its limbs bent at wrong angles. Its head twisted to face me upside down, those glowing coal-like eyes fixed on me from above. Its mouth opened wide, wider. Too wide. You let me in. It dropped. I screamed again, diving toward the closet. I flung the door open and scrambled. Inside, slamming it shut behind me and pressing my back against it. The space was dark, cramped, filled with the musty scent of old clothes. I sat in the dark, heart racing, knife gone, light dead, trying to stay silent. Outside, the room creaked. The breathing returned, closer, slow, deliberate. Then knock, knock, knock. Not on the apartment door, on the closet door. I held my breath, biting my hand to keep from sobbing. It knocked again. Then whispered, right at the crack, I see you. I couldn't take it. I screamed and kicked the door open with all my strength, bursting out of the closet. The room was empty, gone, the creature, the breathing, the cold gone. I stood there, gasping, crying, shaking. I didn't know what was real anymore. I didn't know if I'd gone mad. The door was back now. My apartment was how it should be. I ran for the exit, unlocked every lock, and threw the door open. The hallway was back to normal. Dim, quiet, ordinary. I sprinted out barefoot, ran down the stairs, out of the building, into the rain. I didn't stop running until I reached the 24-hour diner on 7th Street, soaked and shaking like a madman. I didn't care. I called my sister, told her everything. She thought I'd had some kind of psychotic break. She begged me to go to the EE, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And when I returned the next morning, with my sister beside me, the note was still there, folded under the door. Next time, don't open it. She said I must have written it myself. But the handwriting wasn't mine. And the paper, it smelled like earth, like soil, like a grave. I didn't sleep the next night, or the one after that. I stayed at my sister's place for a while. She offered her couch, brewed me calming tea, even lit scented candles like that would ward off whatever followed me. I tried to tell her about the whispers, the creature, the hall that didn't end, but her sympathetic nods told me she didn't believe a word. The worst part, There was no evidence, not the scratches in the hallway, not the water-soaked footprints. The building manager swore nothing unusual showed up on the cameras. You probably dreamed it, he'd said. Happens more often than you'd think. Night terrors. But I hadn't been asleep. I didn't wake up until morning. Still, I tried to believe them. I wanted it to be a dream. I tried to go back to normal. I went to work, ate my meals, took long showers, and stared at myself in the foggy mirror, looking for signs of something broken. But something inside me had shifted. I kept expecting to hear that knock, to see those eyes in the dark. I began locking every door behind me, even at work. I couldn't help it. The sound of knocking haunted me like a phantom limb. And then the dream started. Every night at exactly 12:43 a.m., I'd jolt awake. In the dream, I'd be standing in front of my apartment door. Except the hallway would be gone. Just blackness beyond the threshold, like someone had erased reality. A nothingness that hummed like it was watching me back. Then the knock would come. Not on the door, but from inside the apartment, behind me. And I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. 3 nights in a row. The 4th night, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. I hadn't left the bed. I hadn't touched anything. But there it was, dark, rich soil packed under my nails, like I'd clawed my way out of something underground. I didn't tell. My sister, she was already worried. Kept hinting I should talk to someone, maybe take a break from work. I smiled, nodded, lied. But inside, I was unraveling. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. To the apartment, to where it started. I had to see it again. Prove it to myself that it was real or that it wasn't. When I stepped back into the place, everything felt wrong. It was broad daylight, yet shadows clung to the corners. The lights flickered, faintly, even though they hadn't done that before. And the smell, not just dust and mildew, but something deeper, like damp stone, like a crypt. I stood in the doorway, hesitant to enter. I looked down, more footprints, fresh ones, trailing. From the door to the hallway, I followed them. They stopped right outside the bedroom. That's when I noticed the door was open. I never left it open. I stepped inside slowly and froze. The walls were covered in drawings. Hundreds of them. All in charcoal or some black flaky substance. Sketches of faces, the face, eyes like pits, a mouth that stretched too wide, bent limbs. Dozens of renditions, each more distorted than the last. Some scrawled over one another, some drawn upside down. Others looked burned into the walls. On the floor sat a pile of them. Paper, torn from books and sketch pads. Scribbled with those. Same haunting figures, and always that phrase, "let me in," over and over again, written like a mantra. I stumbled back out of the room, heart pounding in my chest. That's when the knocking started again. Not on the apartment. Door, on the walls. From inside them. Tap, tap, tap. The hallway light flickered. I ran to the front door and yanked it open, but the hallway was gone again. Only darkness. Just like in the dream. I slammed it shut, bolted it, then backed away slowly. Silence fell. Then I heard something creak. The bedroom door, the one I just came from, was slowly swinging shut on its own. Kriek. It clicked into place. Shut. And the whisper came again. From all around me. From inside me. You came back. The TV turned on by itself. Screen. Static. Volume cranked so high it hurt. I fumbled for the remote, dropped it, grabbed the power cord and yanked it from the wall. Silence returned briefly. Then a soft thump from the closet. I turned. My bedroom closet door was slowly opening. I took a step forward and stopped cold. There was something inside. Not a shape. Not a shadow. Just ... absence. Like space. Had folded in on itself. A blackness that felt hungry. I whispered, "What do you want from me?" The answer came from everywhere at once. You already gave it. Then knock, knock on the closet door. Even though it was already ajar, I snapped. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a hammer, anything to feel like I had control. But the apartment began to shift, literally. The hallway stretched again. The walls pulsed. The ceiling cracked. And every surface, the floor, the cabinets, the damn refrigerator began to whisper, "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." I ran. I ran from room to room, but every door I opened led to the same hallway. Endless. Empty. Impossible. I collapsed in the bathroom. Turned on the light and saw my reflection smiling back at me, but I wasn't smiling. I wasn't even moving. I blinked. My reflection didn't. It whispered, "Now it's your turn." I stumbled away from the bathroom mirror, nearly slipping on the tiles as I backed into the hallway. That reflection, it wasn't me. It couldn't have been. It had watched me, studied me, smiled like it knew something I didn't. My breath came in shallow gasps, panic clawing at my lungs as I fled down the hallway. The apartment felt wrong, twisted, too large, too dark. The layout was changing doors where there had been none, corners that curved impossibly. Every time I turned around, something was off. The windows were bricked up. The ceiling felt lower. The lights buzzed above me like flies. And through it all, the whisper never stopped. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." The sound seemed to bleed from the walls, from the floorboards, from inside my own head. I tried covering my ears, but it made no difference. It was inside me now. Then I noticed something else. The air was thicker, heavy. Each breath felt like I was inhaling damp fog. My shirt clung to my back with cold sweat. The whisper grew louder, almost rhythmic, like it was trying to lull me into something, lure me somewhere. I fought the urge to open any more doors, but I had to get out. I bolted to the front entrance, still bolted shut, still sealed. I unlocked it and pulled. Nothing. It wouldn't open. I pulled harder, both hands gripping the knob until my palms ached. But the door refused to budge, as if it was part of the wall now, like it had never meant to open again. Then I felt it, breath, on the back of my neck. I turned slowly. Nothing, but the smell was there, wet earth, mold, the coppery tang of blood, and something rotten. Then the lights cut out again. Total blackness. I stood frozen, heart hammering in my chest. My phone was dead. No light. No signal. I was alone. No, not alone. Never alone. Footsteps echoed behind me, dragging. Slow. Leave me alone. I shouted, backing away from the sound. My foot struck something soft, wet. I looked down. A shoe. Mine. Covered in soil. And then another. And another. Scattered through the hallway like a trail. All mine. All in pairs. All dirty. I never brought these out. Never left them like this. Then I saw the photos on the wall. Dozens of them. Photos of me sleeping. Each one dated. Timed. Every single night I had stayed at my sister's. The photos weren't there before. I didn't take them. Something had been watching me, following me, even when I thought I escaped. Suddenly the hallway filled with creaking sounds, floorboards groaning. The whispering grew deeper, now layered with something else, something more guttural, like growling, chanting. The voices merged, warped, twisted, chanting my name. I bolted to the kitchen, thinking maybe I could break a window, but the windows were gone, completely walled up, covered in cracked plaster. I ran to the bathroom. Nothing. The mirror had shattered. Water was pooling on the floor, dark and still. Then I heard something upstairs. There had never been an upstairs. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps descending from a staircase that shouldn't exist. I turned toward the living room, and sure enough, there it was, a stairwell leading up, carved crudely into the ceiling. It hadn't been there before. It looked old, wooden, damp, like it had been hidden in the walls for centuries. My body screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere left to go. So I climbed. Each step groaned under my weight. The staircase seemed endless, winding. My legs burned. My lungs ached. But I couldn't stop. I didn't dare look back. When I reached the top, I emerged into my apartment again, except it was cleaner. brighter, like it had been freshly moved into. No photos, no footprints, no whispers, but it was wrong. Dead silent. I walked forward cautiously, staring at every detail. On the coffee table sat a cup of tea, warm, freshly. Poured. I didn't make it. On the couch, my phone. Charged. Lit up. A notification. One new video message. I picked it up. The screen showed footage of me, sleeping, in my sister's guest room, but I wasn't alone. In the background, a tall shadow stood over me, bent, watching. I screamed and dropped the phone. That's when I noticed the mirror again. The reflection standing there was smiling at me, not matching my movements, and its mouth moved. You shouldn't have answered. Then it opened its mouth wider, and wider, and wider, until its jaw cracked and snapped open like a pit. From inside, hands reached out, fingers like twigs, black, grasping. I turned to run but stumbled backward, into the wall, and the wall gave way. I fell through, crashing into another hallway. This one was red, lit by flickering crimson bulbs that hummed with electricity. All the doors were open, and inside each room me. Different versions, screaming, sleeping, dying, being dragged away. One of them turned to face me. Their eyes were gone, their mouths stitched shut. Yet I could hear it in my head. You didn't just let it in. You became it. I stumbled backward, eyes locked on the stitched-mouthed version of myself as its words echoed inside my skull. You didn't just let in. You became it. The hallway stretched out behind me, the walls pulsing like veins. The air was thick with rot, every breath burning my lungs. The doors along the hallway, all still open, offered glimpses of horrors I couldn't fully comprehend. Versions of me torn apart, others trapped behind glass. One was laughing, manically, hollowly, its face peeling off in strips as it cackled. I turned and ran. My bare feet slapped against the soaked carpet, which squelched like flesh beneath. Emmy, the hallway shifted again, twisting like intestines, walls closing in 1 second, stretching out the next. I didn't know where I was going anymore. I just knew I had to move, had to keep running. Behind me, the whisper returned. Let me in. But this time, it wasn't coming from outside the door. It was coming from inside my head. Let me in. No, I whispered to myself, clutching at my temples, nails digging into my scalp. No. You already did. That voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a roar. I collapsed to my knees, the floor rising like a wave to meet me. Darkness coiled around me, not just in the room, but in my mind. My thoughts weren't mine anymore. I could feel them shifting. Something else was crawling in, threading itself through my memories, reshaping them. What was real? Had I ever lived alone? Had I ever moved into this apartment? Did I even exist outside this place? My hands trembled as I pulled out the crumpled note, the one that had appeared at my door hours ago. Next time, don't open the door, it read. But there was something else now, scribbled beneath it in fresh ink. Now, there's no door. Left to close. I dropped the paper like it had burned me. Then, silence. The hallway ahead opened up into a room. My room. Except it wasn't. The walls were bare. The bed was gone. The window bricked shut. The only thing in the room was a tall, armless mirror. And in the mirror, me. But not quite. He stood motionless, head tilted, smiling, mocking. I stepped toward it, despite every fiber in me screaming to stop. He mirrored my movements for a while, step for step, breath for breath. Then he didn't. He moved his hand up. I didn't. He reached toward the glass and touched it. Ripples spread out like water. My reflection stepped out of the mirror. It wasn't a copy anymore. It was something else entirely. A hollowed out version of me, eyes sunken, mouth torn at the corners like it had been stretched into that smile by force. I've waited, it said, its voice like glass scraping on steel. For what? I croaked. For you to stop running? It said. I turned to flee, but the door was gone. Just a wall now. Where do you think you're going? It whispered. There is no outside. There never was. It reached for me, and its hand phased through my chest. Pain, not physical, something deeper. A fracturing. I felt it root through my memories. My identity. Erasing. Replacing. Images flashed behind. My eyes, my childhood, my first love, my sister, every laugh, every tear, all burning away to static. I dropped to my knees, screaming. You opened the door, it said, kneeling beside me. You answered. You welcomed me in. This is your reward. I didn't mean to, I sobbed. I didn't know, but I did, it whispered. And now I'm all that's left. Its face leaned in close, and I saw it, my eyes, my smile. It was me, or maybe it always had been. I don't remember the rest clearly. Just the feeling of falling inward, like my soul was being sucked into a void. Everything twisted, swirled, then shattered like glass dropped from a skyscraper. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing. In the hallway, the door was closed. My hand was on the knob. I looked around. Everything looked normal. The lights, the photos, my cup of tea. I stepped back, breath shallow, heart racing. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? I walked to the mirror in the hallway and stared at my reflection. It stared back, but the smile was too wide, the eyes too dark. I tried to move, but I couldn't. The reflection grinned and walked away, leaving me trapped behind the glass, alone, screaming silently. I saw me walk to the front door. It opened it. A little boy stood outside, soaked from the rain, holding a teddy bear. He looked up, shivering. I'm lost, he said. The thing wearing my face smiled kindly, held out a hand. Come in, it said. The boy stepped over the threshold, and the door shut behind him.